My name is Arthur Bennett, and I am 76 years old. The doctors say I have an illness that will not forgive me. They call it incurable in their neat, practiced voices, as though the word were no more dangerous than a gust of wind. But I feel it every morning when I try to lift myself from bed, a weight in my chest, a slow grinding of my bones, a fatigue that settles in like an unwanted guest who refuses to leave. I live alone in a small house at the end of a cul-de-sac. The paint on the walls is peeling, and the roof sighs when it rains. Once, this house was filled with life. The laughter of my children, the voice of my wife singing softly in the kitchen. Now it is filled with the tick of a clock, the hum of the refrigerator, and the sound of my breathing, sometimes shallow, sometimes labored, always a reminder that my time is measured. I wake early out of habit. 6 o'clock without fail. I shuffle to the kitchen in my slippers, put the kettle on, and wait for the steam to rise. Tea is one of the few rituals that still makes me feel human. I take it with too much sugar. My doctor scolds me for it, but I don't care. At my age, sweetness is one of the last small rebellions. After breakfast, I sit by the window and watch the world go by. Neighbors hurry past on their way to work. School children tug at their parents' hands. Cars rumble and cough as they start their daily journeys. They see me, I know they do, but they pretend not to. It's easier that way. To acknowledge me would mean facing the truth of what I am, old, sick, and fading. No one wants that reminder. My children? Well, they have their own lives now. I raised 3, Michael, Sarah, and James. Once upon a time, they depended on me for everything. Scraped knees, bedtime stories, school trips paid for with overtime wages. Now, I wait for their calls like a dog waits by the door. They come rarely. A quick hello, an excuse about work, a promise to visit. Soon! Soon has become a cruel word. The last time Sarah called, I could hear her children in the background, shouting about some video game. She said, "Dad, I'll try to come by next month. Maybe bring the kids." That was 4 months ago. Michael texts instead of calling. Short, efficient updates about his job. A link to an article he thinks I'll like. James, well, James has always been the distant one. He didn't answer when I told him about the diagnosis. He sent a message 2 days later. "I'm sorry to hear that, Dad, stay strong." I stared at the screen for a long time, wondering how to reply to my own son when the words in my throat felt like stones. I don't blame them, not entirely. Life is busy. They have families, careers, obligations. I remind myself of this every time I hear the silence of my phone. But still, when I sit in this chair by the window and watch the seasons change, leaves fall, snow gather, flowers bloom again, I can't help but wonder if they remember that I am still here. Still breathing, still waiting. Some days, I feel strong enough to walk to the park 2 streets away. I carry a cane, more for confidence than necessity, though my legs betray me sometimes. The park is full of joggers, mothers with prams, old couples feeding pigeons. I watch them and imagine myself among them, hand in hand with my wife. Her name was Evelyn. She died 5 years ago, and the world dimmed the day she left. Evelyn had a way of making even the worst days feel survivable. She used to say, "Arthur, hope is like bread. You have to bake it fresh every day." I didn't understand then what she meant, but now I cling to those words like a sailor clings to driftwood. At the park, I sometimes sit beside strangers just to hear their voices. A kind woman once asked me if I needed help tying my scarf. I thanked her, and for that brief moment, I felt seen. Another time, a boy offered me half of his sandwich because he thought I looked hungry. I wasn't, but I took it anyway. It tasted of mustard and kindness, and for the rest of the day, I carried a small warmth in my chest. Back at home, the hours stretched long. I read books, though the letters blur sometimes. I listened to the radio, old songs mostly, because new music feels like another language. I talk to Evelyn as if she's still here, especially at night when the house feels like a cave echoing with my own heartbeat. I tell her about the tea, about the weather, about the ache in my legs. I imagine her listening, nodding, smiling. The illness is cruel in its patience. It does not strike quickly. Instead, it creeps, gnawing at strength, hollowing out energy, whispering in my ear that tomorrow will be harder than today. Some mornings I wake and wonder if today will be the day I cannot rise from bed. And yet, every morning so far, I have risen. That, I tell myself, is a victory. But victory feels hollow when no one shares it with you. Once, I tried calling Sarah, just to hear a familiar voice. The call rang and went to voicemail. I left a message. "Hello, love, it's Dad. Just wanted to hear how you're doing. Call me when you can." My voice cracked at the end. That was 2 weeks ago. No reply. The neighbors don't mean harm, I suppose. They nod politely if we cross paths, but they don't stop. I imagine they think old age is contagious, or that my illness will somehow cling to them if they linger too long. Sometimes I want to shout, "I'm still here. I'm still a person." But I don't. I just smile faintly and let them hurry past. The hardest part isn't the pain. Pain I can endure. It's the silence. Silence is heavy. Silence eats at you in ways no medicine can cure. It makes you question whether you matter, whether your life was anything more than a brief candle soon to be snuffed out. And yet, I still hope. I hope for a knock on the door, a ring of the phone, a letter in the post. I hope for a stranger to smile at me, for a kind word, for a reminder that I am not invisible. Every morning, when I open my eyes, I think, maybe today will be different. Maybe today, someone will remember. Part 2, Echoes and Silences. On good mornings, I talk to the house. Right then, I say, patting the kitchen counter like an old horse. Kettle on, windows open, let's pretend we've got company. The house answers with its usual chorus, pipe, tick, hum, each sound like a friend who has run out of stories. I open the curtains and let the day in. Sometimes the light feels like a visitor. Sometimes it feels like a reminder. I keep a notebook on the table, Evelyn's notebook, the one with a cracked blue cover and a spray of dried lavender pressed on the inside page. I write small lists in it because lists make a day feel navigable. Take pills. Walk to post box. Call surgery. Water basil. Try not to kill. And lower down where I won't have to erase it, ring Sarah. I circle it, then draw a line through the circle, as if that might fatten my courage. The illness is shapeless until you give it appointments. Tuesday is clinic. Thursday is bloods. Sunday is breathing, which is to say every day. I shuffle the cards of my week and pretend I am choosing them. At the clinic, the nurse with kind eyes takes my blood pressure and jokes that our machines are older than our patients. You'd win in a race. I tell her. She laughs and squeezes my shoulder a moment longer than necessary. In the waiting room I count shoes. Trainers, loafers, slippers that have been outside by mistake. I study the faces of the other old men and wonder which of them is pretending hardest. The doctor asks gentle questions with efficient hands. He does not lie. "We'll manage symptoms," he says. "We cannot cure." The we sits between us like a small table. I nod, because nodding is the language here. When I step back into daylight, the world is the same size as before, which feels like a trick. On the walk home, I pass the florist. She's sweeping the pavement of petals. "Morning, love," she calls. I raise my cane in a salute. I want to buy a single carnation for Evelyn, but flowers in my house look like someone forgot a celebration, so I keep walking. At the corner of the school crossing, warden pauses the traffic with her lollipop sign. A boy with one undone lace lopes by, dragging his bag. He calls me "Sir" as he darts past. The word sits in my pocket like a boiled sweet I forget to unwrap. Back home, I make soup out of not much. Carrots softened in butter, a potato for body, thyme from a pot that forgives me. While it simmers, I set the table for two without thinking. 2 bowls, 2 spoons. It takes me a full minute to notice. I put one bowl back in the cupboard and stand with my hand on the shelf until my heart remembers its job. The silence after the clink is a kind of weather. I try Sarah again. 4 rings 5. Her voicemail is a catalog of cheerful promises. I leave a message anyway. "It's Dad. Made soup that didn't fight me. Tell the terrors, I mean the darlings, that Grandpa's got biscuits. No rush to call back." I hang up quickly, so she won't hear the way my breath turns soft at the end of sentences. Michael sends a text that evening. "Big week. Promotion news soon. Proud of you for getting out to the park, Dad. Keep moving." The bicep feels like a party trick. I reply with thumbs and confetti and a line about his mother's basil, which is somehow still alive. He doesn't answer, which is not unkindness so much as an ordinary tide going out. James is different. With James, even our memories are careful. He left home like a door slamming, loud and somehow apologetic at the same time. We argued then in the specific, ridiculous way a father and son can. He said I treated his plans like hobbies. I said he mistook stubbornness for destiny. He packed 2 shirts and a grudge and disappeared into a city that fed him its own brand of certainty. Years later, when we found our way back to words, we used the safe ones. Weather, football, work, never the hinge that squeaks. I want to tell him that my illness is not a punishment, not the last word in the record of our wrong turns. I want to say, I forgive you for leaving before you were ready, and forgive me for not knowing how to let you. Instead, I forward him a link to a match recap and type, "That second goal, eh?" He hearts it. We are 2 men passing a parcel we're afraid to open. In the evenings, I sort the old photographs into piles that make sense only to me. Christmases, seaside, bad haircuts. The one of Evelyn on our 5th anniversary, chin lifted like she could wrestle the sky. The one of Sarah under a tree wearing a crown of daisies and fury because someone else got the bigger ice cream. Michael's school play where he was a cloud and took the role as seriously as if clouds were the point of everything. Jane's in a cardboard box, pilot's goggles askew, announcing delays due to dragons. If I keep looking long enough, the people in the pictures rearrange themselves into the shape of a dinner table. I set the pictures down and the table vanishes. I have a neighbor, Mrs. Kahn, who waters her tomatoes as if they were grandchildren. She stops me one morning while I am adjusting my gait and presses a paper bag into my hands. "Too many," she says, eyes kind and fierce at once. Inside, cucumbers. I try to find the right gratitude, the one that says this is more than vegetables. I manage, "You're a saint," and she snorts. Saints don't swear at pigeons. I laugh out loud, more sound than my kitchen hears in a week. When I slice the cucumber later, the smell is exactly the smell of a summer we couldn't afford a holiday and built a tent with sheets in the back garden. The children ate cucumber sandwiches and declared the lawn a beach. Evelyn wore sunglasses as if Cornwall had come to us. For dessert, we had tinned peaches and pretended they were fresh. The pretending was the sweet. The illness is clever. It steals the small things that make a day frictionless. Buttons develop ideas of their own. Jars stand their ground. The stairs lengthened by 2 steps I swear weren't there yesterday. I've learned tricks. Use the rubber gloves to grip. Sit to put socks on, even if it looks like surrender. Rest before you need to, because needing to rest arrives like a wave that forgets how to stop. Pride is heavy. Put it down. Some nights I wake with my lungs full of dark. I count backwards from 100 and picture the park, bench, tree, path, bin, until the dark thins. I whisper to Evelyn the way you whisper to a sleeping child, so as not to wake the house. I'm here. I'm still here. In the morning, I write it in the notebook as if it were an appointment I kept, stayed. 3:17 a.m. Once, on a Friday, the postman knocked to hand me a parcel meant for number 9. "Saving you the step," he said, and winked. The wink was ridiculous and perfect. I walked it next door and left it on the mat, then stood on the front path pretending to admire a cloud until the door opened. "Oh," the woman said, surprised, willing herself to kindness. "Thank you." I wanted to tell her my name. I wanted to say, "I live at the end house with the bad roof and the good basil. If you ever need sugar, knock. If you ever just need another heartbeat in the room, knock." Instead, I said, "No trouble," because any more would have been too heavy for a doorstep. I try not to watch the families in their cars on Saturday mornings, but I do. Boots slamming, bags flung in, kids complaining that someone has taken someone something. I like the sound of them not liking each other. You only complain like that when you believe the people you're with are not going anywhere. On Sundays, I still set a smaller table. Not for show. For muscle memory. 1 plate. 1 knife. 1 glass. Sometimes I pour a second glass and let it stand there, not as a shrine, but as a dare. "If you appear, I am ready." It looks back at me, clear and expectant, and then it becomes only water again, which I drink so as not to waste it. I keep almost calling Sarah on Sunday evenings. She posts pictures of the children on something I look at with my thumb and forefinger and a squint. Max covered in mud up to his eyebrows. Ella missing a front tooth and not missing her pride. They look like children who could fill a room with noise. Beneath the pictures I type words, "Miss you," "Proud of you," "Soup still not bad," then watch them blink on the screen unsent, a small army of unsentences. I delete them because I don't know how to ask for what I need without making a need into a weapon. Once, in the supermarket, I reached for a jar at the back of the top shelf because it had the longest date and knocked 6 jars off the front. The crash was an opinion. I stood in a shore of pasta sauce and thought, this is exactly how it happens. You live quietly, and then suddenly you are the problem people have to step around. A young woman with purple hair appeared as if conjured. "Don't move," she said, like a bomb squad, and began scooping jars with speed and care. She laughed at herself when she slipped, and the laugh pulled me back into my body. A man from the stockroom arrived with a yellow sign that said caution and looked at me like I was a weather system he had planned for. "Happens all the time, mate," he said. I wanted to hug him, which would have been a strange escalation. The purple-haired girl opened a new jar and tucked it into my basket without looking to see if I could afford it. "There," she said. "War won." At the till I added a packet of biscuits I didn't need and brought them home as if I had earned them in a skirmish. Evening is the time I miss Evelyn most because she was best at evenings. She could turn a bad day into a small joke and a good day into a feast. She believed in laying the table even for beans on toast because a plate can be brave. She believed in candles even in summer because a flame is a promise. She believed in people until they believed in themselves. And sometimes I think the world is dimmer because there is one less person practicing that religion. I struggled after she died with the idea that life had been rehearsing me for a solo I never wanted to sing. The first winter alone was loud with quiet. I shouted at the radio news because it was the only voice rude enough to shout back. I ate over the sink. I used the kettle and pretended it was applause. Then, slowly, the rituals came back. Proper plate, spoon in the sugar bowl, napkin folded square, and the house unclenched. I am still learning how to be a person whose witness is mostly himself. I suppose that is adulthood at its last stage, learning to be the person who says, "I saw you. I was there," about your own life. One afternoon, rain pinning itself to the glass, I tried to bake bread the way Evelyn had taught me. My hands remembered the steps, but my patience did not. The dough sat sullen, refusing to become anything. I almost threw it away, then thought of her saying, "Hope is like bread," and left it longer. When I lifted the cloth, it had risen a little, not magnificently, but just enough to be worth putting in the oven. The loaf came out lopsided and proud. I ate 2 slices standing up with too much butter and laughed like a child who's gotten away with something. I cut the rest into pieces and wrapped them in paper bags. One for Mrs. Khan. One for the purple-haired girl if I ever saw her again. One for the nurse with kind eyes, left at reception with a note that said only, "For tea." The next week the nurse squeezed my shoulder again and whispered, "Best medicine." I nodded as if she had prescribed it. Inside the blue notebook I make 2 lists now. On the left, what hurt? On the right, what helped? Left, no call from Sarah. Right, boy said sir. Left, couldn't open jar. Right, girl with purple hair plus stockroom man. Left, breath like wet paper. Right, Saturday. Counted bench tree path bin. Breath returned. The right-hand column is always longer than I expect. It is never long enough to fix the left, but on better days, it is long enough to make a bridge. Occasionally, late at night, the phone rings and I jump like a soldier hearing a far-off bugle. It is almost never one of the children. It is usually a wrong number, a sing-song voice asking for Darren or Chloe, and when I say they have the wrong man, they apologize as if they've trodden on my foot. Once it was a survey asking which toothpaste I prefer. I told the woman on the line more about molars than she'd asked for, and we both laughed until her supervisor must have frowned at the length of our data. When I hung up, I wrote in the notebook under what helped. Someone needed my opinion about teeth. It looked ridiculous and completely true. On Wednesdays, the bus driver kneels the bus for me without being asked. He does it with a flourish like a stagehand lowering a chandelier. "There you are, king," he says. "Your carriage." I tap my cane on the step like a scepter. People pretend not to smile and then smile anyway. If you want proof the world can be kind, ride a bus at midday. No one is in a hurry worth protecting. Strangers reach. Bags shuffle. Space is made. I wish I could tell my children all this without making them sorry. I wish I could say, "Your father is afraid sometimes," and "Your father is braver than he expected," in the same breath. I wish I could invite them to Sunday lunch and also release them from Sunday. I draft a letter in the blue notebook. My loves, I am learning to live in a smaller circle, but you are still at its center. I am not a problem to solve or a promise you broke. I am your old man learning how to bake hope like bread, some days a little lopsided. If you come, I will put the kettle on. If you don't, I will put the kettle on. Love, Dad. I don't send it. Not yet. I sit with it the way you sit with someone who's nearly said what they needed to say. On a cold Thursday at the chemist's, the pharmacist writes my dosing schedule in thick marker on the side of the box. Morning with food, she says, then looks up to make sure I'm not pretending. You're not a nuisance, she adds, unprompted. I blink. Was I trying to be? She smiles. Everyone thinks they are. I walk home with the box tucked under my arm like treasure. That night I dream of our old kitchen table. In the dream, Evelyn is laying places for 5, not 4, not 3, not me. Who's the extra 4? I ask. She looks at me as if I've missed the obvious and says, For Hope. You have to make room for it. I wake up with the taste of laughter in my mouth. In the morning, I set out 1 cup, 1 plate, 1 knife, and a saucer, empty on purpose. It looks like an invitation I haven't posted yet. The days do not change their minds about being days. The illness does not become polite, but the notebook fills, and the bridge of the right-hand column holds. I learn which hour is best for the park bench, 10, before the prams and after the joggers. I learn which shop assistant will chat about nothing with me for 2 whole minutes without looking at the queue. I learn how many breaths it takes to get from my back gate to the lamppost and back. 57 on a good morning, 80 on a bad one, both count. I am not waiting for a miracle. I am rehearsing for the small kindnesses. They always arrive slightly off cue, from stage left, wearing ordinary clothes. They never bow. If you clap, they look embarrassed. But they steady you, and you can cross the scene. Some nights the phone does ring, and it is Sarah, and her voice is flustered and warm and full of crumbs. Dad, I'm useless, I know, she says. You're not, I say. You're a person. She tells me Max scored twice, and Ella read a poem that made the teacher pretend not to cry. I tell her about Mrs. Khan's tomatoes. We'll come Sunday, she says. We will. I can hear the will in her voice. It sounds like a promise trying very hard to grow up. When we hang up, I sit a long time with the phone in my lap, not because I expect it to ring again, but because for a few minutes it was heavy with a conversation, and I like the weight. The blue notebook lies open on the table. I write on the right side, Sarah called. Then I turn to a fresh page and write across the top in small, careful letters, "If Sunday comes." Under it a list, biscuits. Max's muddy boots tray. Ella's poem. Kettle. Kettle anyway. I underline anyway twice in case I forget. I do not know what the next part of this story holds. The doctor's voice is a map with fewer roads than it used to. That much is true. But the bus still kneels for me. The boy still says, "Sir!" The chemist still writes in thick marker like she's labeling the important. And when I put my hand on the table and say, "Right then," the wood says in its wooden way, "Right then," back. Tomorrow I will try the park at 10 again. I will take a slice of the last lopsided loaf in a paper bag in case a stranger looks more tired than me. I will put out the saucer. And if no one comes, I will pour tea into the saucer myself just once, for the child I used to be who loved breaking little rules because it made the day feel like it was listening. I think that might be what hope is at my age. Small, stubborn rule-breaking that harms no one and convinces your own heart to stay. I'll write that in the notebook tonight. On the right-hand side, under what helped. Part 3. Small sparks of kindness. The illness does not announce its progress with fanfare. It comes in whispers, in the spaces between breaths. 1 week I can manage the stairs without pause. The next, I must rest halfway up, pretending I am admiring a photograph on the wall. Evelyn's photograph. She smiles as if to say, "Carry on, Arthur. Don't let the steps win." But the steps do win sometimes. That is the truth. It was on one of those weary afternoons that I heard a knock at the door. I was not expecting anyone. No call, no text, no warning. My heart leapt into my throat, foolishly certain it must be one of the children. I shuffled to the door, every joint aching with anticipation, and pulled it open. It was the postman. "Parcel for you, Mr. Bennet," he said cheerfully, holding out a box. I took it, hands trembling, though not from the weight. "Thank you," I said too softly. He smiled anyway and added, "Have a good day, sir." When I closed the door, the silence rushed back in, heavier than before. The parcel was not from my children. It was medication. pills and powders in sterile bottles. My companions? I sat at the table and laughed, a dry, bitter laugh that echoed in the empty room. But then something unexpected happened. I remembered the postman's smile, a genuine, unhurried smile, as though I mattered. It was absurd, but it warmed me. I wrote it down in Evelyn's blue notebook. Postman smiled. Said sir. That helped. The next week, I tried to venture out again. The air was crisp, the kind of air that feels almost medicinal, though my lungs struggled to agree. I walked to the small bakery on the corner, cane tapping rhythmically against the pavement. The young woman behind the counter looked up and grinned. "Good morning, Mr. Bennet," she said, as though she had been waiting for me. I blinked in surprise. "You know my name?" She laughed. "Of course I do. You always buy the same thing, one crusty roll and a slice of fruitcake. My mum says consistency is the sign of wisdom." Her words wrapped around me like a scarf. I bought 2 slices of fruitcake that day, though I could hardly finish one. It felt like a celebration, like a rebellion against the illness that wanted me to shrink. Back home, I ate the cake slowly, savoring not the taste but the memory of her voice. For the first time in weeks, the food did not taste of ashes. I wrote again in the notebook. Bakery girl remembered me, called me wise. That helped. There are moments, fleeting and fragile, when kindness finds you unguarded. One evening, I sat outside on the small bench by my front door, watching the sunset bleed across the rooftops. A boy cycled past, no older than 10. He stopped, turned his bike around, and looked at me with earnest eyes. "Are you okay, mister?" he asked. I hesitated, unsure how much truth a child could hold. "I'm managing," I said at last. He nodded seriously, as though this answer passed some test. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wrapped sweet. "Here," he said, placing it in my palm. "It's my last one, but you can have it. My mum says sharing makes things better." Before I could respond, he pedaled off, leaving me staring at the small sweet in my hand. It was lemon-flavored, my least favorite. But I ate it anyway, tears stinging my eyes. That night, I could not sleep for thinking about the boy, about how easily he had given away his last sweet, while my own children found it hard to give away even a minute of their time. In the notebook boy on bike gave me a sweet. That helped. The illness has its way of isolating you, but it also sharpens the senses. You notice things others overlook. The creak of a neighbor's gate, the uneven rhythm of their steps, the way their laughter fades too quickly. You see the burdens people carry in silence. Mrs. Khan, with her tomatoes, knocked one afternoon. She brought me a bowl of curry, rich and fragrant, and insisted I eat it while it was hot. "You remind me of my father," she said, watching me with kind, stern eyes. "He was stubborn, too. Always said he was fine, even when he wasn't." I wanted to protest, to insist I was fine. But instead, I bowed my head over the food and whispered, "Thank you." We ate together at my small table. She told me about her grandchildren, about how they bickered and laughed, about how they made the house alive again. I listened, smiling faintly, but inside my chest something cracked open. I missed that noise. I missed it more than words could hold. After she left, I sat for a long time in the quiet house, her laughter still echoing faintly against the walls. And for the first time in months, I did not feel invisible. Notebook, Mrs. Khan's curry. Ate together. That helped. But these sparks of kindness are dangerous too. They make the silences sharper. After Mrs. Khan's visit, the house felt emptier than ever. After the boy's sweet, my children's silence tasted more bitter. Kindness is a blessing, but it is also a reminder of what is missing. That night, I dreamt of Evelyn again. She was setting the table, humming one of her songs. There were 5 plates, just as in the last dream. I asked her who the extra plate was for. "For Hope," she said, smiling. "Always for Hope." The park was nearly empty, except for a young couple with a toddler. The little boy wobbled on unsure legs, giggling each time he fell and scrambled up again. The parents clapped, cheering every attempt. I sat on a bench watching. My chest ached, not just from the illness. Evelyn and I had done the same with Daniel decades ago. Every stumble, every tiny victory, we had celebrated like a miracle. The toddler noticed me. He toddled over, fists clenched for balance, and held out a flower, just a weed plucked from the grass, its petals half gone. "For you," he said solemnly. The parents rushed over, embarrassed. "I'm so sorry. He just—" But I shook my head, tears finally spilling, warm and unstoppable. "Thank you," I whispered to the boy, taking the broken flower. The parents smiled uncertainly. The boy ran back to them, laughing. I stayed on the bench until the sun dipped low, clutching the weed like it was a treasure. And perhaps it was. Perhaps it was proof that the world still had room for me, even in its smallest corners. Notebook, boy gave me a flower. That helped. But the nights are harder. At night, the house feels like a cavern, every creak and echo. I dream more often of Evelyn. In the dreams, she is not always young. Sometimes she is old, lined and gentle, sitting across from me with that steady gaze. One night I asked her, "Why didn't they come? Why don't they call?" She smiled sadly. "People forget, Arthur. They get busy, they build lives, and they forget the hands that once held them. But forgetting does not mean they never loved. It only means they're human." When I woke, the ache in my chest was almost unbearable. But her words stayed with me, softening the edges of my anger. The illness grows heavier. Some mornings I can no longer manage the stairs at all. I stay in my chair, wrapped in blankets, waiting for the kettle to whistle, waiting for the phone to ring. It rings once. Daniel's voice rushed, guilty. "Sorry, Dad, I've been swamped. Work's been crazy. How are you holding up?" I tell him I'm managing. I don't mention the hospital letters piling on the desk, or the nights when I can't breathe properly. I don't want to be a burden. He promises to visit soon. I don't ask when. I've learned that soon is a word without a calendar. After the call, I stare at Evelyn's photograph. Was I a bad father? I whisper. The photograph does not answer. And yet, despite it all, hope clings stubbornly. Like the weed flower in a glass of water by the window. Like the sweet from the boy on the bike, the curry from Mrs. Collin, the roll from the bakery girl. These are my proofs. Proof that kindness exists, even if it is not always from the people I expected. Proof that I am still here, still visible, still worth a smile, a sweet, a flower. One night, the pain is worse than usual. I sit in my chair, Evelyn's notebook on my lap, unable to sleep. I flip through the pages, each small kindness, each moment that helped. The notebook is nearly full now. At the end, I write one last entry. The world is cruel, yes, but it is also kind in flashes. Enough to keep going. That helps. I closed the notebook, set it on the table, and leaned back. Through the window, the moonlight spills across the floor, soft and silver. For the first time in months, I do not feel afraid. I feel tired, yes, but not afraid. I whisper Evelyn's name, and in the silence that follows, I almost hear her humming again. And so I wait for the morning, for the next kindness, for whatever comes after. Because as long as there is breath in me, there is the chance for one more smile, one more sweet, one more flower. And perhaps that is enough.